Figured he's the perfect guy to talk about the subject matter that dominated my heart and mind yesterday. The passing of Dwayne Haskins at the age of 24. Way too soon. And joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show from Sports Illustrated is their senior NFL writer, the man who puts together the MMQB and is a diehard Buckeye. He is none other than Albert Breer. How you doing, Albert?
I'm good, Rich. How you doing?
I'm better for talking to you. I'll put it right in your lap. Who was Dwayne Haskins, Albert Breer?
I think I think we have a tendency sometimes to, in these moments, kind of have a hard time, wrapping your arms around exactly who a guy was. I knew him in passing. I didn't know him that well, but obviously I've got a lot of connections to people and know a lot of people well who knew him well. And so I talked to a lot of those people over the last 48 hours. And, the one thing that kind of keeps coming up is genuine, big heart. I mean, all the coaches at Ohio State, they'd all have some story of something that Dwayne did for their kid, I even had, one coach had told me that he's got a jersey framed, a Haskins jersey framed in his office at home. And on the number 7, there's the normal thing like, hey, coach, thanks for everything, Dwayne. And then on the bottom of the 7, it says, and say what's up to, and it's got his kids' names on it, and he was just, look, there's no question when he came in the league, he had a lot of growing up to do. But, he had a big heart. He was well-intentioned. He wanted to do the right thing. I kind of have a soft spot for guys like this that are that age where, they almost sometimes have to mess up on their own to figure it out. And I think Dwayne was one of those kinds of kids that had a huge heart and wanted to do right and wanted to be great and all of those different things. But maybe it came along a little slower with him at times because he had to kind of see it for himself.
Look, look, Albert. I mean, we've all been around the block here on the NFL, you and I and everyone else, and we've heard stories about guys who come out early or come out too early or need some growing up, and the NFL is a very difficult fishbowl in which to mature and grow up, and and Haskins might have been that guy, but. His family have been robbed of the times in which, he becomes mature. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again and maybe have immense professional success. And now we have been robbed of that. He and his family have been robbed of that. And it's just awful. I saw Ryan Day say that they're going to honor him at the spring game that's coming up this weekend. I imagine there will be many testimonials then as well as this fall as well for Haskins,
And I got a couple stories that I think can kind of encapsulate, where he was going and how he wanted to get there. And, I heard this story yesterday. And it was, after the Illinois game, his redshirt freshman year. So he wasn't starting yet. And, they'd blown out Illinois and it was raining and windy and ugly, that night in Columbus. He got in at the end of the game, and, he made a handful of errors. Just was not a good night for him. And, he came out of that game, and he, just felt horrible about it. So not knowing when the next time he's going to play is going to be, he went back that week, and he decided to bury himself in his work. And I'm going to make sure I get this right. And I'm going to, I can't let that happen again, And so the next week was the Michigan game. And he didn't know, again, that he was going to get in. J.T. Barrett was the starter. He gets hurt, and Dwayne goes in. And you know how that one played out.
He was spectacular.
Dwayne played great. And, I had a coach tell me yesterday, we thought that was when Dwayne basically set the stage to beat out Joe Burrow in the spring and win the job and have the great 2018 that he had. And I'm telling that story because I think that the people who were closest with him felt like that was where he was in his pro career now. That, 2-week period was sort of a microcosm for where he was working in Pittsburgh now, where he knew he'd messed up in Washington. And, he knew he had a lot of stuff to work on, and he was quietly getting that work done and trusting, that he would get the sort of result that he got all those years ago, when he quietly went to do his work after, that ugly night against Illinois. And it's heartbreaking hearing that, because you think about young people that are lost so young, that are lost way too early. You think about all they had left to accomplish, and a lot of the people who I think really loved Dwayne felt like he was at that point where he was getting ready to turn the corner. He'd grown up and he got married last year, and they were so hopeful for what was in front of him. I can even tell you, like with the spring game this week, they tried to get Dwayne back there a couple of weeks ago. They had a big recruiting weekend, and they wanted to get him back there. And, I think he was a little, from what I understand, like he was a little sheepish about going back to Ohio State because the great relationships he had there and everything else, when he went back, he wanted to go back proudly. Like he wanted to go back as a success story, and he wanted to wait until he had the sort of success in the field that he thought he was capable of before, they brought him back and kind of had him, be one of these faces of the program, which, he's so richly deserved to be. And they were talking to him about coming to the spring game this weekend. And, it's just, again, like, it's just so sad to think about, like, how hopeful everybody was around him, and what great things he had to accomplish, and not just in football, but the way he was with other people, and the smiles he put on so many people's faces. It's just it's tough hearing those stories, Rich. Because as you kind of sort through this, I think again, like with people who are gone so young, you think of all that was left to accomplish, and certainly talking to the people around Dwayne, they were all convinced that the best was in front of them.
Any idea what he was doing out on that highway? Will we know? Any idea?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple days ago, I had heard something that, like, he'd run out of gas on the highway. There's so much speculation out there right now. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's that's the best way I can answer it, because I do think that there is, from what I understand now again, like, I know it's out there, he was down there. Mitch Trubisky, I think, had hosted a bunch of the Steelers offensive players.
Yes.
And it's one of these passing camps to get ready for the off-season program. And so, my understanding was they were up in Boca, and I think, at least what people around him thought was that he was heading to the airport when this happened. Again, like, why he's out walking, I have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, and again, there were like those details that were coming out at the beginning. But I just, I don't know if it was just a massive error in judgment. I'm just not sure, Rich, and I hate to speculate on what it might have been.
Albert Breer, the MMQB senior NFL reporter here on the Rich Eisen Show. So 2 weeks from the draft on Thursday, and Baker Mayfield is not going anywhere until when? I mean, I got the sense. Yeah. I got the sense when Matt Ryan took that final seat in Indianapolis and the game of musical chairs sat Mariota in Atlanta that this was going to go past the draft, and it sure looks like it. What's the timing on this?
I mean, I think it's sort of going to come down to if Baker wants to force the issue, and I think one thing he can do to force the issue if he desires to do that. And I've said this a few different places, Rich. Like I think it like show up to the off-season program, and like that in itself, like if you show up, like that becomes a problem for the team. They just want you to go away, So maybe he shows up to the off-season program and he tries to force the issue. I think this is really going to come down to Cleveland's willingness to take on money and how much money they're willing to take on, because I don't think Baker has zero value across the league. Like, I think he's still seen as sort of a back half of the NFL starter. Like, I don't think he's seen as this guy who only can be a backup. But there's no, like you said, the music is sort of stopped and the chairs are full. And so, if somebody was going to take him on as a reclamation project and say, okay, we're going to roll the dice on him for 1 year and he's going to be our starter, then they may be willing to pay the $18.858 million. But lacking that, and seeing where the opportunity might be to come in and maybe just compete for a job, no one's willing to pay that amount of money. So as much as anything else, it's going to come down to how much money the Browns are willing to take on. And, and then finding the right suitor for him. I don't think Carolina is very interested right now. My understanding is Detroit's not really talking about it either. Seattle over the last couple of weeks has stuck out to me as the one where if the Browns are willing to take on some of the money, then Seattle can take another swing at the quarterback position at replacing Russell Wilson by putting Baker Mayfield in a competition with Drew Lock. And remember, taking multiple swings is how they found Russell Wilson in the first place, so it sort of fit with who they are,
right,
and how they do business at that position.
Or they covet somebody in the draft, and they want to make sure that if they don't get the guy, then they'll revisit this, right? It may not just be, even if
possible too. And that's 100%. That's the way it works this time of year too, Rich. You know this. In a lot of cases, teams will go into the draft with needs, but as you know, the free agent market's the needs market, right? The draft's supposed to be the value market where you're not supposed to press needs, and so sometimes teams do come out of the draft with needs unfulfilled. And certainly you could see where, Pittsburgh, for example, right? Now you keep hearing Pittsburgh connected to Malik Willis. Let's say Malik Willis goes in front of Pittsburgh. They don't get a quarterback, but they still want to bring in somebody to compete with Mitch.
Right.
I don't know if Cleveland would trade him in division and eat money to do that. But, maybe Pittsburgh would be the sort of team that would be set up to make that call if they come out of the draft without another quarterback.
And
I certainly see what you're saying, where we're getting past the draft could smoke out a few more suitors.
Yeah, and then there's Garoppolo out there whose place on the roster appears to be affecting Deebo Samuel's Instagram account, right? After the Stephon Diggs signing and Garoppolo still being on the roster, that's cash they could give to Deebo and or Bosa, if not both, right? What's the deal there?
Yeah, and it sort of does work to stop up business a little bit, and what the Niners could do with, some more cap space, like you said, two foundation pieces there in Bosa and Deebo, who were drafted 3 years ago, that they could take care of. The situation with Garoppolo is a little different, though. I really do think Jimmy would have a starting job right now if it hadn't been for the shoulder surgery. I think somebody would have taken that swing on him. I think the issue you have now with Jimmy, because of the shoulder issue, is can you count on him to be what he's been the last few years when you get to September and October? And because he's only under contract for one more year, you're by definition acquiring him for 2022. So say you're Carolina, right? People's jobs are on the line in Carolina. And I do think there are people in that building that like Jimmy. Do you trade for Jimmy knowing he's going to miss the entire spring? He's not going to be throwing again until late June, early July. And then even then, you may think that he's going to be okay, but that's sort of an unpredictable thing. Is he going to be full go in training camp? And you're trying to put in a new offense, right? With Ben McAdoo there. So there are all these things that sort of the shoulder complicates. And, if everybody's fighting for their job, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to kind of wrap your head around the idea of really going all in on somebody like Jimmy. And so I think with Jimmy, it's really more than anything else, the shoulder that's complicated things. I do think that there are teams out there that look at Jimmy and say that guy could be a really good starting quarterback for us if healthy. The problem is he's not healthy right now.
Last one for you, Albert Breer, before I send you on to this Monday. Bill Belichick hit the big 7-0 over the weekend.
How about that?
And, we talk all about Brady's end game scenario for his career and Rodgers, and we focus on quarterbacks all the time. You've been around this man. You covered the team for a long time, just straight up as a beat writer, and now obviously as a national reporter. Do you think we'll ever know Belichick's plans until the last second? How do you think this is going to play out when it's all said and done?
What do you call it, a septuagenarian? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I think, right? We have two of them. We have two of them now.
Pete Carroll as well.
I don't know. That might be a first. Him and Pete Carroll. I don't know if that's ever happened before, where you got two 70-something coaches in the league. I guess 70 is the new 60. I don't think we're going to have advance warning. I don't think there's going to be a Coach K style farewell tour. I don't think you're going to get any of that.
Will you get a whiff? Do you think you'll get a whiff or a hint, or it's just going to be one day? Whoa, Bill's decided to step away.
I think whenever he leaves it, he's going to want to leave it in good shape. One thing I can remember from covering him on the beat, and this is years ago, was I remember there were a couple of situations where he felt like Bill Parcells, who obviously had been his boss, had left a couple of teams in pretty rough shape, And I think there was sort of this resolve that whenever he left New England, he wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to walk away from a team when it wasn't, in better shape than he found it. And so, I do think he's driven to prove that he can win without Brady and win at a high level without Brady. I do think he wants to leave it, whoever he's leaving it to, whether that's Bill O'Brien or Matt Patricia or whoever it is that winds up succeeding him. I think he wants to leave it in good shape for whoever it is that's the coach after him. And I do think that there's, the element of it for him where he still enjoys it, Rich. And I think there's that part of it where the guy, he loves going to work every day. It's not as hard as it used to be because the program has been established for so long. He likes the people he's working with. His kids are at work with him, which I think I wouldn't know this yet, but I would assume is a huge thing for a guy of that age, with grown kids. I think he's sort of got it working now where he doesn't have to work quite as hard as he used to have to work to make things go. And now I think the last piece of it for him is repairing it and getting it back to the point, maybe not where it was before, but getting it back where he's handing something over to someone that's in really, really good shape. And, I think obviously drafting Mac Jones last year was a huge part of it. But I don't think we're going to get some sort of announcement. I think the signs that you'd be looking for, if you were looking for a sign, would be that the team's winning again and that the future looks bright. I'm not sure they're quite there yet. But, it does look better than it did a year ago. I think they still have a little ways to go.
Well, maybe, when he's available for the off-season workout program or what have you comes up in another week, we can get that stringer from, Vermont, who asked him twice about his New Year's resolution. We can get her out there to ask the question about his retirement plans. Maybe we should do that.
I'm sure he'll be very illuminating if he's asked that question.
Maybe she can take the bullet for us on that, to get the answer.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a bad thought, Rich. I can remember there was a time when, the Herald and the Globe, and this is, back in the old newspaper wars, and I've been on both sides of that one, by the way.
Yes.
I can remember there was a time when they would send in general assignment reporters to take bullets. And
which one did you take? Did you take one?
It's a little known fact of the Boston media, the past of the Boston media. I don't think those places have the sorts of numbers to do those sorts of things anymore.
Right.
But there was a time when there were people jumping in front of the line of fire on those ones.
Did you ever take one? Did you ever take one for the team?
I've taken lots of bullets in my day. You've heard the confrontations before.
Well, I know.
I just got to the point where I stopped caring. So yeah. No, I've been in front of that firing squad before. I mean, you are talking to the guy. You are talking to the on to Cincinnati guy. You do remember that?
That's right. You asked the question that got the famed response.
It was me and Michelle Steele, and they had just gotten blown out by the Chiefs, if you remember that, on Monday night.
Oh, yeah.
And I asked, do you think you're doing enough and acting with enough urgency to build a champion around Tom Brady? I asked that a couple different ways, a couple different times. And sure enough, they went on to win the Super Bowl and win 3 out of the next 5 Super Bowls and play in 4 of the next 5 Super Bowls. So,
you're welcome, New England.
Yeah, thank you, Albert.
You're welcome.
I guess I got my answer.
You're welcome, New England. And I guess you won't be getting the retirement scoop from Belichick when it's all said and done because of that.
Well, we'll see. I think we're in a better place than we were then.
Oh, that's good. Fantastic. We've grown. We've all grown.
I'm not gonna close that door. If he wants to do that for me, I wouldn't turn it away.
Well, Albert, thanks for the 2 cents on that subject and so much more. And, my condolences to all of Buckeye Nation, man. I am so sorry to hear about this awful, awful, awful loss of Dwayne Haskins. And I send my best in your direction.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And, hey, I mean, I think the important thing, just all the best to his friends and his family. I would point anyone to, and I tweeted this over the weekend, I would point anyone to, if you really want to know who Dwayne was, Big Ten Network did a great piece on his relationship with his little sister. It was incredible. And so, anybody can find that on my Twitter feed. I'll retweet it after we get off the air here. But I think there's a good window into who he was. So all the best, and our prayers to the Haskins family and everybody who knew him.
Well said. At Albert Breer, we'll be checking that out. Thanks for the call, Albert. Greatly appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Rich.
You got it. That's Albert Breer. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.